Most cyclists train for power, almost none train for what happens after 2 hours. You've probably done intervals, maybe even done back-to-back rides, but if your legs vanish in the final hour of a big day, like that one friend who's always offering to help to move but disappears at the very last minute, you're missing something. What you're missing is durability. Not how strong you are when you're fresh, but how much power and speed and focus you can still hang on to at hour 4. Durability is what keeps your watts from free falling when fatigue kicks in. It's the difference between riding strong and finishing strong. In fact, some researchers are calling it the 4th pillar of endurance. So how do you actually train it? These 3 workouts will fix that. Let's dive in, because nothing says fun weekend like pre-fatiguing your legs before the main set. Workout 1, fatigue resistance intervals. Build the ability to hit and hold target power when you're already tired. This simulates what happens in the final effort of a long ride, a race, or a fondo when your legs are heavy but you still need to perform. Because let's be honest, riding well when you're fresh is kind of easy, but durability shows up when things get hard. Fatigue resistance isn't just about power. It's about producing power after you've already been riding for hours. This session combines prolonged sub-threshold load with high-intensity efforts. It mimics real race conditions, where your body has to shift into high gear even after significant fatigue has built up. The key here is elevating your heart rate gradually and then layering in intensity to trigger VO2 demand, a method that balances aerobic and anaerobic stress and avoids overloading your neuromuscular system. This session is highly adaptable. You can use it for 4-minute VO2 max intervals, 8-minute threshold efforts, or surging formats like bursts. The magic is doing them under fatigue. Say you wanted to do 4-minute intervals. This matches what researchers call HIIT, Type 3 and Type 4, which are a mix of aerobic and anaerobic training with manageable strain and big aerobic payoff. You could structure a VO2 max style like this. Warm up 30 minutes, building to 50 to 70%, including a 1 minute at 115 to 120%, and then the main set is 4x4 minutes, but start with 3x4 minutes at 110 to 120% with 4 minutes recovery between efforts. Then give yourself time. Say it's 40 minutes at 60 to 70%, and then complete one more interval, the same format, 4 minutes at 110 to 120% with 4 minutes to recover, and then cool down with 5 minutes at 55%. You can adapt this format endlessly. Just make sure the intensity happens after some work. That's when the real durability stimulus kicks in. Now let's analyze a session already completed so you know what to look out for and can execute and adjust. We can see here that there are 2 sets of intervals, these ones starting here and these ones at the end. Of course, they're not lined up and you can mess around with that, but it's not so important. What is important is having a look at heart rate, and then even RPM shows something, but it's not so important right now. But first up, I like this comparison between, say, the first 2 efforts, which they start approximately here and end here. Now, if we can look at the numbers from this, we can see average 254 with a heart rate of 160. Now, if we do the same on this end, 223 with 156. So power's down and also heart rate is down, which really does say they're performing these under fatigue. Now, the only other thing I want to check here is what this middle part consisted of, hour 189. So it was in the lower end of their endurance. So it really does show that even with a pretty low endurance between these efforts, it is enough to cause some damage and make these last intervals really difficult. Because a common mistake actually is doing this stuff too hard. This was right at the bottom of their endurance zone and it was still really difficult. Granted, 4 times 15 minutes efforts is really difficult in itself, but it doesn't need any more difficulty between these to make the efforts at the end really hard. If you think that sounded rough, the next one's a 2-a-day special, because what's better than one ride that hurts? 2, of course, and then back to back, of course. Workout 2, compound rides, or back-to-back days. Build resilience to cumulative fatigue by riding on tired legs, especially useful if you're preparing for multi-day events or stacking heavy training blocks together. Durability isn't just about how deep you can go in a single ride, it's how well your performance holds up across repeated efforts and repeated days. In 2021, LAMEDA and Seiler defined durability as the ability to maintain performance as fatigue builds over time, not just minute by minute, but hour to hour. And back in 2014, a study by Bishop showed that repeated loading, like riding 2 days in a row, can improve mitochondrial function and delay fatigue. More recently, Jones and Kirby highlighted that some athletes lose power more quickly than others during long sessions, and that this rate of decline is highly trainable. So that's where compound rides come in. By riding on fatigued legs, you're forcing your body to adapt under load, and over time, this means a stronger engine that holds up, not just shows up. Day 1 is 2 to 3 hours of endurance, and I would start there, and then over the weeks you could add more intensity, so tempo if you're feeling strong, for example. Then day 2, say 4.5 hours at an RPE of 2 to 3 out of 10, and you will have heavy legs. That's the point. And even pros get this wrong. I watched one destroy day 1 with intervals and then crumble the next morning. They got sick and they lost a week of training, and that's why I go off feel on day 2. No ego, just execution. But let's talk about a common mistake. Turning this into a 1-day smash fest. So you go too hard on day 1 and day 2 becomes a recovery ride disguised as training. And maybe you can do this after you've built up over a few months, but don't just start hard. Start easy and then work your way into it. Let's look at this session done by a semi-pro athlete. It's a perfect example of this type of workout. This session here of this compound ride really is a great example of someone understanding their body, listening to their body. The day before they had a race, granted it wasn't a race, but they had a race the day before. I still sent them out for 4.5 hours. But of course, because I base my compound rides on RPE, so the feeling of 2 to 3 out of 10, I think they can regulate their response really well. And the thing that I look at to show for regulation is heart rate. Now we can just get a flat line across here by showing zones. And we can see that they were regulating this heart rate almost perfectly across the entire effort. It is super flat. And it was a continuous effort for the entire ride. Now, their power to heart rate, so their decoupling is 6.4%. So, of course, we want to see 5, but it's not perfect. I just see the problem here. I think power is declining, heart rate stays the same. So that is where the decoupling comes in. So they adjusted their power to maintain their heart rate effort, but it's really, really good effort. And this is basically what you want to aim for. It doesn't matter if it's 4.5 hours, it can be shorter than this, but this is ideally what you want to see after you've completed this ride. Before we move on, let's have a quick flashback to how this all started. In the 70s, researchers noticed something weird, and they called it heart rate drift. So even when riders held steady power, their heart rate crept up. In the 80s, they found glycogen depletion made riders recruit less efficient muscle fibers. Back then, we called it fatigue resistance. Today, we call it durability. And now we can train it on purpose. Up next, possibly the least glamorous workout name in cycling, but one of the most underrated weapons against late ride collapse. Yep, it involves cadence, and no, you don't get to skip it. Workout 3, Cadence Reserve Intervals. Train your ability to hold smooth, efficient cadence even when you're tired, so your form doesn't fall apart when it matters most. When you're fresh, holding a fast, snappy cadence feels automatic, but late into a ride, your legs start to grind, your rhythm slips, and so does your power. A recent 2025 study by Leo and colleagues found that just a 3% drop in cadence can lead to a matching drop in power output, especially in all-out efforts near the end of a session. It's a subtle decline that feels small but costs big. I call this cadence reserve, which is your ability to keep your smooth spin when fatigue hits. And like anything else, it's trainable. So this workout targets that exact skill, measuring and maintaining neuromuscular coordination when your body wants to default to survival mode. Warm up with 20 minutes with 3 by 30 seconds of high cadence effort, so 100 plus RPM. And then there's like a 5-minute ramp to 85%, then 5 minutes easy. Then we get to the pre-fatigue block, so 45 minutes at 65 to 75%. And optionally, you could add some 2 by 2 minutes with a higher intensity and cadence towards the end of that block, but the main set is 10-minute interval blocks. So you either want to alternate cadence, 2 minutes at 95, 2 minutes at 105 RPM, or do the whole thing at a very high RPM, and then you're cooling down afterwards. At 105 RPM, it's less smooth pedaling and more jazz drummer with a knee brace, but this chaos happens on purpose. It keeps your neuromuscular system online even when everything's saying slow down. Here's a great example of this session that I can show you right here. We see this session here and it looks easy on paper, I'll admit it. But as far as what it's trying to do, it's not about the power at the end. We can see this right, increase the power, but it's not about the power at the end. It's about the ability to maintain smooth cadence after it gets hard. So we can have a look at things like heart rate. And we see that the heart rate does increase pretty quickly when it comes to this first block. There's a little bit of an adjustment period here, but then it levels out nicely across both of these, and then it reduces back down really quickly. Let's have a look at the RPM to see where they were sitting at across these. So if I zoom in here, so it looks like they didn't do it here, which I think they forgot initially, but once they did, they ended up sitting at 95, which is maybe a bit low. So the interesting thing here, I have to confirm whether they knew that they had to do a higher cadence or not. And they're probably not reading the instructions right, or the alternative is they couldn't actually get to that level, which probably means that they should be doing more. So I'll be pushing them to do 100 plus just to see what that feels like. Because obviously they're either not used to it, they can't do it, or they haven't done it before. They did increase it, they just didn't maintain it. So it's already highlighted for me that they need to spend more time doing this. They need a little bit more work on this. And then we can talk about how it felt subjectively, if they're able to maintain the pace, how did it feel smooth, were they bouncing on the saddle? Are there things that we can monitor over time to see if they're getting better, smoother? Then the idea is that then translates into longer rides. So now you've got 3 workouts. They're brutal, they're smart, and they'll help you do something most riders can't. Finish strong, not just start fast. This is what helps you ride through the fade while everyone else disappears like that friend who promised to help you move, because these aren't just about fitness. They're about durability, the 4th pillar of endurance. It's the difference between looking good on paper and actually showing up at the end. Want the test protocol? The workout files and full athlete durability guide, it's linked below along with a calculator to figure out your fatigue power reserve. That's the metric that shows how much you fade. And if you want to go deeper, join Team Semi-Pro. The entire system is built around durability because we don't train for performance in the first hour, we train for the last hour.